Justice is a huge concept, but there are ways to bend every little action towards it. I locate my dancing in the midst of everyday life because my dancing is inspired by lived experiences, and I believe dancing can be a force for realizing justice and liberation. My choreographies realize communities around these ideas and recognition of our shared humanness. I hope to capture imaginations, provoke questions, and inspire change. Throughout my career, I've engaged with a hybrid research agenda where I am working with ideas of justice both through my dancing body and choreography with dancers and through scholarly research. So in my writing, I'm also thinking about how dance actually sits in a larger frame of culture making and how that impacts and is impacted by what's going on in people's lives right now. In dance, I take the same ideas and see how to find realizations, images that will inspire us to think, ask more questions, and be moved towards a different way of working. So, for students to know they have the power as dancers, as dance makers, to shift ways of thinking, that's one thing. And then there's, audiences, working with audiences and collaborating artists and dancers in my creative research to do the same thing, how to move people to shift towards a more just life. What I'm most proud of in my academic life is how my research actually flows into my teaching and how my teaching influences the ideas that I work through in my research. I am committed to educating folks who come through the door. So sometimes education teaches us to narrow our minds. I'm interested in how we can liberate our imaginations so we can imagine what life would be if we didn't have the hierarchies that put us on one level or another. Now, dance is a highly ableist practice. Very often we are pushing forward able-bodied articulations. How can different bodies find their way in there? So I'm always thinking of the notion of hierarchy. And if all of our students thought about it, dance itself as a practice would be different. And then, we get used, for instance, to seeing in this country, in Western dance practice, stage practice, we definitely see this notion of, men lifting and moving around women. What if that wasn't a thing? What if that wasn't at all part of our practice? Can students imagine dancing beyond that? Can students imagine a way in which, a dance in which touch is always respectful and thought through and consensual? So choreography was always thoughtful, mindful, of each other's the bodies and dignities and the boundaries that we want respected. So these are ideas that are both part of my teaching and part of my research. They are part of everything. So the question is how we can decolonize dancing as a practice. That is at the core of my work. So I teach courses such as Theorizing Dancing Bodies, where we can look at the ideas that have been articulated perhaps in discourse, but how do they filter through our bodies? How do they filter through notions of beauty? Because, beauty is something where dance gets stuck at a lot of times. Something was beautiful. And we forget about, but was it just? Was it equitable? Was it liberatory? So how do we answer those questions through a critical framework? And that, decolonizing dance is also about understanding what joy looks like, how to pair images that are about devastation and courage at the same time, how to not take over other people's stories, but to remain committed to articulating hidden, little-known stories. So, they're all part of my practice in theorizing dancing bodies, in A course I teach, which I love, called Choreographing Social Justice. It's also in re-examining past histories we've been told. I teach dance history. I also teach technique and, learning and practicing with my students. A sustainable way to dance is one of my favorite things to do. Social justice choreography to me is different from making dances with a political theme. Social justice means that I have to think through every part of my process in making and realizing. I can make dance in a political theme in a closed-off dance studio with myself, not really considering as much how I will get it out there, who am I involving in the process of creating, how will I create access, how will all the processes around that production also reflect a commitment to equity. Social justice means I am thinking from the beginning, how is the piece being imagined? Who am I in conversation with? Who will be impacted by it? How will I get them into the theater? Are these people who regularly come to the theater? How will I make space for people who have issues of access? How will the dance be recognizing of different bodies, different relations of power that we hold among us in society? So in a way, it's a large undertaking. It's a whole process-based approach. Ananya Dance Theatre is the dance company that I founded in 2004. It started with a call to women of color in the community, and it has grown to be a professional company of women and femmes from Indigenous, Black, and off-color communities, and we take on the mantle of cultural activism. It means we do this social justice choreography. It also means that we understand dance as a range of practices. So one is the very meticulously thought through and staged dramatic performances that we perform and tour with. And there are also what I call choreographies in the midst of life, where we will perform, for instance, at a street corner, in a parking lot, perhaps over an extended period of time, engaging with audiences and invoking them to join us in articulating or advocating for something. Apart from this, the dance is also dance is created through long series of workshops where we invite in community members to be in conversation with us. So dance is something that people are able to see in the midst of their everyday life. And we also have just inaugurated a space. We describe it as the Shangram Institute for Performance and Social Justice. And it's a refurbished used car sales place. So it's literally got these huge windows on University Avenue where with cars passing by, the buses and the light rail passes right in front of it. So people can see dancing, and as they are going from their bus stop to their house, or they're going from one place to another, and they're always seeing this, dancing. And some people dance along while they go. The children from the daycare center next door always stand up by the windows and make some hand gestures at us, which is beautiful, right? They're growing up with this sense that dance is not something museumized, something pushed away, but something that they can use maybe to articulate their emotions, their stories in everyday life. And I love that we are also located across from two schools, the Gordon Parks High School and the High School for Recording Arts, with whom we have building relationships. But this notion that dance is something that can be part of our lives as an articulative, expressive medium from a grade school all the way through. And some of us use it in everyday life, some of us use it as professional practice. That's something that's very important to me. Sutrajal means network of connections. And I see it as happening in an imaginary place. I call it the GLOFUNK, the Global Feminist Funk Underground Club. So this is an imaginary club that is under the ground, and I imagine feminists from all over the world coming through it, through tunnels, and really dancing off all of their frustrations from everyday struggles. And in that collective moment of dancing together, they're rejuvenated and they return to their struggles the next morning. This piece is haunted by people, women and femmes, who have gone before us and whose struggles towards equity may not have been recorded in history. We also look forward to a future because, we are asking the question, what happened that this completely disappeared? This club is gone. How did that happen? And I look. We were creating it at the time of the fires in the Amazon. And it was very clear to me that sometimes communities disappear not because of some natural disaster that just happened, but because humanity, we, through our actions, pushed our ecosystem too far. And the casualty were people who are unable to have the resources to save themselves from that. So this whole idea of the Amazon burning, pushed by agribusiness, this was something that was really devastating. And then there were all these reports about how long humanity has. Well, how do we dance at a time like this? How do we still commit to justice? How do we still recognize our shared humanity? Sutrajal was part of all of that. I love collaborations because I recognize that my expertise is in one thing. It's in making dances. I have ideas about costume and lights, but I want to rely on those who have spent their life chiseling their understanding of these. So I work with a lot of collaborators, and they influence my ideas a lot of times. And we are cross filtering our ideas through each other. What collaboration does for me is remind me that the cult of the individual is a false notion. The cult of the individual is just belies the truth of the real movement towards justice. It's always this idea, I come back to this idea of the ensemble practice, because when we share ideas and find a way to balance the different ideas, different interpretations of the same idea within the same image, then we're actually learning how to coexist with difference and actually work towards a shared goal of making a better image, but it's got many different ideas filtered into it. Sometimes, of course, also collaboration teaches that there are moments where we just cannot agree. So sometimes, either I have to say, all right, I am the originator of this project, and I have to make a final decision. And sometimes it might mean saying, all right, I'm sorry, but no, your idea doesn't work. And how to say it gracefully and still work with the person with a lot of grace and understanding, that's one thing. Another thing is how to work with folks with saying, actually, I like your idea, and not let my ego take over and say, all right, that's definitely a better idea. Let's move forward with that. So collaboration is also another way of working towards, with this equitable notion of creative process. I want to just mention one of my powerful collaborators in life has been Lori Carlos, who is a treasure of this country and stayed and worked in the Twin Cities for a long period of time. So I was making dances, and she came into my process and she says, well, what you're doing is what I call the jazz aesthetic. And this is this notion of great improvisation and taking basic ideas, a sort of structure of ideas, and then allowing them to take you on many different routes, many different imaginary routes, and returning to them. That idea of the jazz aesthetic, And she said, I know you don't know, but that's what you're doing. And, I'm grateful to her because that shaped my choreographic process for time to come. Because I knew I had language now for what I was doing. I have several upcoming projects. 2020 is election year, but I hadn't thought of that when I started this project. This project I imagined many years ago. This next project that I'm creating for the stage, it's called Agun, meaning fire. And it investigates homes, belonging, and the difference between borders and boundaries. So here we are in a state. The Dakota name is Minnesota Makoche. And I'm very, very conscious that Dakota and other Anishinaabe and other Native communities want us not to always take on this notion of this land is our land. We are on occupied territory. So I recognize and respect the borders of indigenous communities. At the same time, I see what is happening at our southern border, at the border of India, where I'm from, the kind of violences that are happening at national borders. So I want to investigate that kind of tension and really find our home and our belonging with each other in the midst of that. So that's one project I'm working on. And I'm also working on investigating how dance can be a healing practice. I'm interested in the EMDR, the eye movement rehabilitation therapies that are used to work people through traumatic situations. I'm, of course, not a doctor and not medically trained at all, but I am trained in using hand gestures, eye movements, and storytelling. I wonder if there can be a regenerative practice for all of us, because we all have wounds from everyday life. So how can it be a healing practice for all of us? Which is a different end from the project around, professionally danced, high energy stage performances. But this is a different regular practice. So both, I'm researching those. I'm also just finishing a book about contemporary dance from the perspective of South-South choreographers. Change brought through performance is something that we have to really meditate on. It's got to be crafted with great care, because people don't come over to change because of money, and they sure aren't coming over because of getting famous. People are going to be influenced and towards change, or they're going to shift towards change because of the way in which you move them. And that has to be an energetic and an emotional impact, but it also has to be influenced by how you give of yourself with humility and how you channel and chisel your expressivity. So people find ways, inroads into the work, into the world you are invoking on stage. That's why choreography has to be really thoughtful. Which doors are you leaving open? Which doors are you closing? And also, of course, everyone is not going to be impacted in the same way, but you have to keep trying. So that long, resolute practice of choreographing social justice is brought about through mindful craft, looking at every aspect of production, not just the movement, not just the relationships on stage, how lighting is done, how costumes are done, what kind of music, what kind of sets you are using, and how were they all produced to bring together a community that is looking at the world around us. So I make what I describe as people-powered dances of transformation. Transformation happens because we are able to share space and share rhythm, share movement, without running into each other and without stepping on each other's toes. It means care taken on everybody's part. So we like the idea of dancing together, but we have to also take on the responsibility of taking care of each other as we dance. So how can I dance fully, articulate my full humanity and my full creative range while recognizing that sometimes if I reach my arm out without looking behind, I might be smacking someone on the head. So how do I take care of self and other? That kind of ensemble practice is what I'm committed to, and that's what I describe as part of transformation. Change can't be for one person. That individualistic notion of freedom is not attractive to me. I'm more interested in a community-based, community-embedded notion of liberation.